think it's also important to notice the kind of the lexicon of language used between filmmakers, sound designers and composers, entering into this understanding through language of what necessarily is needed for the project, you know, and that kind of symbiotic relationship, I think, is quite an easy flow between departments that we were able to get there through this kind of very specified terms of terminology, sound palettes, etc., and how each can be different, the differentiation between scenes and dynamics. It's all very important. It's all part of the process to be aware of. Miles, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess it's probably worth noting as well with the language aspects that this was the third film I'd worked on with Jamie, and the second film I worked on with George, and the last one I did before Muntjac was both of you working together.
Yeah.
And fostering the kind of common language of ways that we describe sounds and ways that it's interesting working and creating this kind of shared brain whilst you're making something with other people. I think it's really important when you go into relationships to be open to how other people perceive the world and what other people's perspectives and backgrounds lead them to bring to the project in their own way. Because I feel like us being open with each other, making these projects, it's been we've allowed each other to be as creative as possible.
Sure.
By kind of recognizing that each person has their own set of interests, their own history of making. And, do you know what I mean in terms of influence?
Yes. Go on, Finn.
Sorry. And on that, like I don't have that much knowledge in sound design, composing, and everything. I have a bit of musical knowledge, but I think there was definitely certain things where I felt limited in the language that I had available, and I was describing things in my own way. But I think that's something to be aware of if you're working with a director or somebody who doesn't have the language that you do, that there's going to be a disparity and you have to find a way to bridge that gap. Yeah. I think we did a great job of that.
Totally agree.
Doing the meetings and the notes that we had going back and forth. But
I think we talked more, we did speak about specific things at times, but a lot of the time we were just speaking about how do we want this to feel, like, and things like that, rather than just like about specific sounds and things, and getting really meticulous with it. It's like, what's this scene trying to say and how are we going to accomplish it and what's the mood of it and things like that. I think that's more important, especially when you're working, even before you get the film or a rough cut or anything like that.
Definitely.
It's interesting how there's like this polarity between the feedback that we give as well. The really meticulous notes of, can we change that? You'll see later on if you come watch the film at Encounters that there's a lot of punches at one point. It'll be like, can we just change that punch to this time code? Or,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The really meticulous details, or the kind of really broad strokes, which I think from everything I've learned about directors, I didn't direct this film, this was Finn's direction, but working with the actors, oftentimes it helps to not be too specific about when they turn or when they do something.
Allow that space for the magic just to kind of happen.
And just do broad strokes, like don't blink as much. Or, do you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And it's interesting how the same applies to collaborating with people across different mediums, how sometimes the broad strokes actually let other people's own genius come out to work. And yeah, it's interesting.
I think also that's like something that maybe if I was to go back, I would have maybe been a bit more fluid in the notes that I gave, especially at the beginning. I think I was almost I had my own ideas a little bit too much. And I think, I can't remember where I was going with that. Yeah, we had a lot of references and I had a lot of specific things that I knew that I really wanted. But actually I think it's important to be able to let go on both sides of your own like ideas and see where it takes you, especially as a director. Like, I think being able to let other people do something magic and just let that happen instead of trying to control everything is...
Yeah, I suppose it's that kind of creative mutual respect, isn't it? And also trust and understanding that eventually down the line, the goal will be reached and it will be brilliant. If you kind of nurture each other's confidence in which to flourish, then some really fantastic stuff happens. And as a caveat to all this kind of communication, which has been an absolute dream, a breeze, like I feel so connected to these individuals more so than I can in any other creative project I've ever done, is the back and forth, the kind of very human side of the communication as well as the creative side. I think that's really important and maybe gets overlooked because that kind of sets a foundation of before you get into the creative process. And if that understanding exists on a human level, then you do have that platform to go and achieve some really great things. So I think it's just more of an encouragement for empathy and sincerity to allow your kind of true, lovely character to shine through. Because everyone in this room is talented. Everyone involved with the project's talented. That's almost a given. That's what you want to set up before you get going. And the rest is, does it work on a social level? Is there ego? No. Brilliant. Well, let's make the project as good as it can be. And I think that was something that really shined through on Reflection. The amount of communication we all went through for as long as it did, you know, and I think it's a very lovely thing.
Well, the time frame of the post-production on this was it 11 months?
It was,
Something
yeah.
so. That's probably because we took the ridiculous decision to not record at any time on set. So basically the whole film was MOS, which is kind of a daunting task for you guys when we bring you this 25-minute cut with still wasn't even finished, the cut by the time we gave it to you, but we just to start the conversation. But
it works.
In that time of 11 months, people die, people have breakups. In your life, I mean, not necessarily the collaborators, but everybody's having their own
Yeah, we're all
lives
still here.
throughout that process. We are luckily all still here. It's pushed us to the limit.
Jamie had a close one last night.
Exactly. But it's interesting, as you said, keeping it human and being respectful and also having trust in, if you get the right people involved in your projects, or if you're leading a project and you trust the person from the outset, then you can, it's the best place to start from, because then you know that they're going to be committed and they're going to bring something to it, and you don't necessarily have to treat that person like a machine that needs to make something for you or the project. You know?
I think something we went into this with, without actually saying it, is basically it's just like best idea wins almost. Kind of, if one of us had something to say, you guys listened, then you're like, oh, maybe try this or whatever. There's like no ego at all. You leave that at the door. It's best idea wins. Whatever serves the film, the narrative, whatever. I think that just ultimately leads to the best possible product, I guess.